Here on Lemon's World, we've talked about the Mount Rushmore of true lemons. Now, we don't just mean Lemons race cars, we mean lemons in general. Cars that are awful, that everybody knows are awful. We've even done an episode on the Pinto/Mercury Bobcat, which is definitely on the Mount Rushmore of lemons. And in that episode, we deemed the Pinto to be underrated.
Underrated. Yeah, the Pinto is definitely on Mount Rushmore. Another Mount Rushmore car, the Vega. Is the Vega underrated? We talked to one of the very few Vega Lemons racers, Jan of Hangar 13, to find out.
Now, the amazing thing, this is the kind of stuff you just can't make up. Jan is married to another Lemons racer who races a Pinto, Tom of Tommy Salami in the Meat Wagon. We have a married couple with a two-car team that's a Pinto and a Vega. I mean, this is just a match made somewhere.
So this story just keeps getting better and better. Now, Tommy Salami, he owned this very same Pinto in high school, sold it, lost track of it, lost his virginity in it, he says.
Oh, grody.
Got it back for a Lemons racer, like decades later. Built the car, and he's been running it. Now, Jan, she drove a Vega in college. She drove this Vega in college. She lost it. She found it again, brought it back to be a Lemons racer. However, she brought it back to be a Lemons racer, and when she got it, it was a bare shell 2 weeks before the race.
Now, why 2 weeks before the race was this thing completely disassembled and immobile? Well, unlike the Pinto, which we noted has a pretty good motor in a car that occasionally would explode, the Vega had a very bad motor in a car that would rust to pieces. The motor is a very weird aluminum block with cast iron head pushrod 4-cylinder. It's almost like an alien civilization came down and tried to build a Toyota R motor, got a bunch of the details right, but then kind of screwed it together and it was all wrong.
And by alien civilization, Nick means one of the largest automakers in the world with a century's worth of experience, and they still screwed it up. There were cooling issues, there were NVH issues, the thing would puke oil all over the place. A couple little improvements were made over the run. It was never a good setup. It was what we would call but terrible.
Yeah, it was no Pinto. The Vega bodies were very prone to rust. One of many specific issues was that the rust-proofing process systemically missed a spot under the front fenders.
You missed a spot.
Which didn't have any inner liners because they would have cost $2.28 per car to add.
Vega's just had this staggering number of recalls. I actually had a girlfriend in high school who had a Vega, and the thing that impressed me is that the trunk made of cardboard, and it got wet, and it dissolved. Everybody knows now these cars were just pieces of and as a result, they're basically extinct.
Except for this one, Jan's old car. Once she got it back, since it A, didn't run, B, didn't have an original motor or replacement parts available, and C, probably wouldn't have worked very well even if she had been able to replace the original motor, the clear option to move forward was an engine swap. With a clean slate, what do you stick in this thing? You know, I'm not even going to dwell on that point because the obvious answer is an Iron Duke.
Yeah, obviously. Now, what is an Iron Duke? Well, it's a little 4-cylinder General Motors engine that is, harsh and poorly assembled, and it weighs way more than it should, and it doesn't make a whole lot of power. But unlike the Vega motor, it actually kind of holds together. Now, Jan's Iron Duke, it's 2.5 out of an old S10, seems to run pretty well, and best of all, it is attached to a 5-speed in place of the 2-speed Power Glide that these things came with.
Now, while the T5 is an upgrade over the Power Glide, it does also have some downsides. This one, because it was in the S10 truck, has a super low granny first gear. It was totally useless on track. Second gear has bad synchros. Fifth sounded like it was going to explode every time they shifted into it. So, for the race, they used third and fourth, which compared to the 2-speed Power Glide is... it's got to be better.
There were other problems with the transmission swap too, particularly that the location, when you got all that sorted out, The shifter had to be like 2.5 feet long and basically horizontal, which, works on one of the 2 remaining gears. On the other one, if you're in 3rd gear, you hit a bump, clang, it just drops right out. They actually had to take out the original shifter, put in a lightweight unit, and remove the 8-ball shift knob on top. Too heavy, wouldn't stay in 3rd gear.
Meanwhile, for the suspension, Rock Auto amazingly had NOS parts for both the front and rear suspension, stock replacements. Brakes also were stock, including the apparently impossible to adjust rear drum brakes. Wheels and tires also stock, 13 inchers.
Jan describes the driving experience as, and I quote, as if a rusty 70s economy car had sex with a multicolor 90s economy pickup with cash, grass, or ass stickers and a black ice air freshener that smelled like weed. Which is, in fact, exactly what happened.
Now, meanwhile, her husband, Tommy Salami, Pinto pilot, does point out the Vega has one advantage over the Pinto, which is looks. It's a cool looking car. But otherwise, as far as the Vega experience, Tommy Salami just says to, and I quote, ignore the smells.
But this is racing, right? So how did the Vega do in this matchup of titans against the Pinto?
Yeah, the Vega got demolished. But to be fair, Tommy Salami's Pinto is a seasoned racing machine, and the Vega, as we pointed out, was a rolling shell 2 weeks before its first race. Next time, they'll apply the lessons learned and dominate.
Well, okay.
Now, to be fair, the Vega is a rare car in Lemons. I think we've had like 3, basically, and it did finish, which is a huge accomplishment. I think that kind of covers it, except, we did already establish the Pinto is underrated.
Underrated.
I don't know if we've established whether the Vega is underrated.
It is the car for everyone. One car for every need. It is amazing and should be driven by everybody. It is clearly the car of the year.
Viva Las Vegas! Can't play guitar though. Well, that's okay. Neither could Elvis.
Is this a reasonable place to park?